It's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Al Iannuzzi, who is Vice President of Sustainability at the Estee Lauder Company. And as he comes up to the stage, which is not that far to walk, let me share a few highlights. Mr. Iannuzzi was instrumental in developing Estee Lauder's recently announced 2020 to 2025 Environmental, Social, and Governance Goals, or ESG goals. In this capacity, I guess they expect you to be walking a long way up, right? In this capacity, he leads efforts for sustainable reporting, green power, carbon footprint reduction, sustainable packaging, and many more sustainability issues. Before joining Estee Lauder, he was Senior Director of Environment, Health, Safety, and Sustainability at Johnson & Johnson. He is also an adjunct member of the faculty at Purdue University, Indianapolis, where he teaches a class on product improvement and sustainability. His full bio is in your kit, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Al Iannuzzi of Estee Lauder.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Claire, and thank you to the Better Business Bureau for the privilege to be here. What I'm going to share with you this morning is Estee Lauder's sustainability journey. And what I wanted to do, probably many of you are not that familiar with all of the great brands that are part of Estee Lauder. So to kick it off, I have a video which will describe some of our brands and some of our commitments when it comes to corporate citizenship and sustainability.
Our beauty goes far beyond our products. Our beauty is the love and dedication of our global family. 80,000 strong, who carry our core values far beyond our doors. We are more than a beauty company. We are citizens of the world. We are the Estee Lauder Companies.
So I think it's pretty appropriate to speak about corporate citizenship in this forum because that's what the Better Business Bureau is all about, right? And the lack of trust, as you mentioned today, I think companies need to up their game when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to projecting what they stand for. And you could see on this slide some of the great brands. Before I joined Estee Lauder, you know, I was familiar with the Estee Lauder brand by walking through a mall. You know, you always see the stores there, but I didn't know about all the other great brands. And when I started looking at them, I was like, wow, I didn't know that. Like Clinique is part of the family, MAC Cosmetics, Origins, Aveda, a part of the family, and a lot of other great brands. Excuse me. So what I wanted to do today is just to tell you a little bit about the company and our mission. Estee Lauder is a family-based company, which which is based on the Lauder family. It was founded back in the 40s by Estee Lauder. You know, women developed and controlled business way back when, way ahead of its time, and it's still controlled by the family, even though it's a publicly traded company. There are second generation, third generations involved in running the company too. One of the things that attracted myself to Estee Lauder was it's great to work for a company that you know, that does well, but when they invest back into great causes, it's really amazing. And when you see, you know, when you hear about purpose-driven companies, I believe Estee Lauder is really the company that fits into that. So a couple examples here. So this is the 25th year anniversary of the MAC AIDS Fund, which is now called Max Viva Glam fund. So before it was in vogue, Estee Lauder was funding research and helping people who had AIDS 25 years ago. Think about that. So here they are, selling prestige cosmetics and hair care and fragrances, and that's all they could have done. But to make the world a better place, they invested in this. So there was over 500 million that have been donated from Estee Lauder into that AIDS fund. Another one that's pretty impressive too is the breast cancer campaign. The breast cancer campaign is something that is very evident to anybody who watches any social media at all. You'll see the pink ribbon, right? And even like the NFL, you'll see them highlighting breast cancer too, which is really great. And it really was initiated by Estee Lauder, was one of the main founders behind that whole movement. And this is another one where 76 million has been donated to research. And I got the privilege of going to a fundraiser last year, and I was really amazed to hear about the progress that's been made in breast cancer. And I believe a lot of it has to do due to Estee Lauder in putting dollars towards research, and the detection and the survivability now is so much better than it was years ago. So that's another thing that really makes me feel good about working at this company. And then girls' education. So, if you look at who does Estee Lauder primarily sell to, it's women, it's girls. So it makes a lot of sense to have that nexus of supporting women's education, girls' education. So giving them an opportunity where they might not have had an opportunity to get an education and to succeed in life. And then employee volunteerism. Employees really like to work for companies that will give them the freedom to do good works. And we actually have a program called Good Works, which enables our employees to donate their time, their efforts to do community service type of work. And that's something that we're looking to expand even further than what we have done so far. So this is just a little example of a foundation in which we built our sustainability, and we're building our sustainability program on. And I would like to say, one thing I like to mention whenever I speak about sustainability is that I don't believe there's any sustainable companies out there. I believe sustainability is a journey, right? And it's something you always can get better. You always can be doing things in a better manner. So we are on a sustainability journey, and this is part of our story. The reasons for really paying attention to this, besides it being the right thing to do, is there's also great business reasons for doing this too. If you look at investors, it is growing rapidly with these ESG funds. So there's like bars. In order for you, if you're a publicly traded company, if you want to if you want to have your stock purchased by certain stock funds, you have to meet a certain level of performance when it comes to sustainability. And you can see there's assets, over 12 billion worth of assets that are under management by these ESG funds. So this is a driver and a good reason to be paying attention to this. Even if you didn't think it was the right thing to do, it makes a ton of business sense. And then consumers. The consumer that we sell to is really super interested in sustainability. They want to know, what's in the products that they're buying. They want to know that the packaging is made to be recovered. I mean, there's been like over the last few years this really momentum on plastics, and it's just like growing because of the issue of plastics in the ocean. And the consumers are picking this up, and even if they don't feel comfortable about what your company stands for, they'll purchase at other companies where they feel like you're living into sustainability and you're concerned about the environment and your employees and making the world a better place through your products and services. And then finally, employees. There's a competition for resources out there for employees, and what I've seen over the last decade, that there's a growth of interest of employees that they don't just want a job. They want a job where they feel that they're going to make a difference in the world. They're very bright people, and they have options on where they can work. So if they see your company doing some of these things and living into this, and with evidence and facts and data, it makes them feel really good about joining a company. And we see a lot of employees, before they even want to think about joining a company, they'll do research and look up the sustainability report and see what the company's saying about sustainability. We've seen that it also helps with employee engagement. You know, when they know that the company is doing some of the things that I shared already, and that they're trying to get better, and they're trying to make improvements, and they're trying to address the issues of society, then it helps with employee retention as well. So what are the key issues for us? The key issues are listed up here, and to me, coming from Johnson & Johnson, which was a great company and had, you know, it was based on a family values company like Estee Lauder, a lot of similar issues. Anybody who sells to consumers will have these type of issues. But you can see, you know, the cross-section of social issues, citizenship type of issues, and environmental issues, you know, lowering the impact of your products, living into the circular economy and trying to recover your waste packaging, for example. Those type of things, the ingredients in our products, those are the most important things to our company. And what I wanted to do is to share our new sustainability goals. So I joined the company about 9 months ago, and I was really fortunate to hear our CEO talking about sustainability. And he wanted us to have more robust sustainability goals. So on March 6th, we announced 11 sustainability goals, and I'm just going to share them with you, maybe a little rationale as to what why we're living into this. So our first goal has to do with packaging. So as I mentioned already, when our consumers purchase our products, they're interested in ingredients, they're interested in how transparent a company is being about what's in their product, but what they touch and feel is the package, right? And when they see something that's overpackaged, you know, they're not happy about that. Or if they're like wondering, can I recycle this package? And it's really a challenge when you think about prestige beauty, because you're selling, you know, you're not just selling like a mass product where you could use like the lightest weight packaging possible, and your customer's going to be happy with this. So it has to look and feel prestige, yet it has to have lower environmental impact. So it is a challenge. So what we've committed to is to make all of our packaging, to strive to make our packaging recyclable, refillable, reusable, and recoverable. And also to increase the post-consumer recycled content in our packaging by 50%. We also want to make our paperboard that we use to be sourced from sustainable forests. So we're on this journey. So that's what we're doing regarding packaging. That's why we're doing it. So ingredient transparency is another thing. So we heard about trust already today. So customers, consumers, they trust companies that are transparent about what they're doing, and even if they don't have all the answers, to basically say, we don't have all the answers, but this is what we're working on. So one of our goals is to make all of our key ingredients in all of our products available, what that ingredient is and why we use those ingredients in our products. So that's another step that we're doing as part of our goals. Another very interesting thing has to do with responsible sourcing. So years ago, when I entered the environmental field, all we were concerned about were our factories, our R&D centers, and about minimizing environmental impacts from those centers. But then we learned through life cycle assessment and other issues that your biggest impacts could be in the raw materials that you're purchasing, or the use of your product, or the end of life of your product. So that this concept of greening the supply chain came up, and one of the goals that we're trying to look at is to manage the ingredients that we use, what we call sensitive supply chains, to identify sensitive supply chains to reduce risk both from a social, from a biodiversity issue. So having action plans for anything we might consider a sensitive supply chain. A couple examples of what we would consider a sensitive supply chain would be like palm oil or mica, those type of things. Because some of these raw materials that we might be purchasing, there could be multiple, well, there are multiple steps in the supply chain all the way back to the farm. And trying to, now companies are being held accountable for even a derivative that you're purchasing to know, is there deforestation associated with where the material is originating from, or is there child labor or forced labor in the supply chain? So it's very complex, very difficult, but it's a nut that we have to crack, and that's one of our commitments too when it comes to responsible sourcing. And we have specific goals to sustainably source palm oil as well. And then when it comes to emissions, so I was really fortunate when I came to Estee Lauder. They have like awesome greenhouse gas emission reduction programs and green power programs. So they have commitments when I entered the company to for net zero emissions for their scope 1 and scope 2, the emissions that they have control over, their factories, the electricity they purchase. And also they signed on to RE100, renewable energy 100% for all the electricity that we use. So that was really great commitments, and a lot of strides were made. But what we're doing is we're committing to broaden that, to look at, again, supply chain issues and setting scope 3 emission targets, scope 1, 2, and 3 science-based targets. So that's our suppliers, working with our suppliers and encouraging our suppliers to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to adopt green power programs, just like we have. So that's something that, it's taking what we've done already, building on great success, and taking it to the next level. The other goals that we set out that kind of tie into what are most important or material to our company has to do with social investment. So through the programs like the MAC/AIDS Fund or the Breast Cancer Campaign, we want to touch 10 million individuals around the world through those programs. So that's one of our objectives. And also, what we've seen and what we know to be true is that brands that have a purpose are more successful. So, you could sell a prestige hair care product, for example, but if it's connected to a purpose that is going to make a difference in the world, consumers are more likely to purchase that product and also to show brand loyalty. So we set an objective that all of our brands, by the end of 2025, will be connected to either environmental or social purpose. An example would be like the MAC Cosmetics company is connected to the MAC/AIDS Fund. Our Estee Lauder brand is connected to the Breast Cancer Campaign. Those are examples of that. We also have more environmental leaning brands like Aveda, which has done a lot of work with water, preserving water and connecting to good causes there, and forests as well, and same as for our Origins brand. Employee engagement. So getting your employees involved is really a critical thing for not only retention, but also for driving sustainability programs. So we are looking to expand our Good Works program and employee volunteerism to engage 50% of eligible employees to be involved in one of these programs. And then learning. So we are going to make available to every employee in the corporation an ability to learn more about sustainability. An example would be something that we've done fairly recently is that we are members of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, and through that we were able to purchase sustainable packaging e-learning modules, and we made those available to, I think we had a license for like 200 users, so anybody who touches involved in designing or marketing packaging, we want them to take those type of programs. We want to make those type of programs available. Things such as LinkedIn Learning, that type of stuff. We also recently just had 2 trips to a recycling center in Brooklyn where we had marketers and packaging developers and engineers go there and to understand better on what happens to the package at its end of life. This way they could be thinking about this when they're designing new packaging. That's just some examples of the type of learning that we're doing. Employee safety. So if you're a manufacturing firm, such as we are, we manufacture products, there's moving equipment, there's employees that could be injured at work, and what we never want to see is anybody leave one of our factories less healthy than when they first came in. So we have really great sustainability safety programs, and we're ramping that up even further. So we set even more stringent objectives for ourselves to drive injury rates even lower. So that's what we released in March, and that's not the end of the story. As I mentioned earlier, sustainability is a journey. So we are going to be releasing additional sustainability goals during our next sustainability report, which we're planning on releasing in September. And you're going to be hearing some pretty exciting announcements about us doing some things with wind power, with solar, and just basically driving more sustainable practices throughout all of our operations. So we have a lot of retail space, right? So what are we doing to make those retail spaces as sustainable as we possibly can? So rolling out like best practices and sustainability to there. That's some of the directions that we're going in the green power areas. Ingredients, what we want to do is to up our game in green chemistry. So we've had green chemistry programs for a while, but we want to set even higher standards and bars for our formulators so that they will be able to go beyond regulatory requirements, which we have been doing, but even more so, to set our own green chemistry targets and to have every one of our brands strive to meet those green chemistry targets. So reducing environmental impacts of our formulas so that even though it's not required by law, but just to up our game in that area too. And for packaging, what we want to do is to make our packaging more sustainable. So an example would be our Aveda brand was one of the first to put post-consumer recycled content into tubes, and they even have some tubes that are close to 100% post-consumer recycled content. So those are the type of things that we want to lean into, that we want to keep on growing and expanding our programs into. So there's a lot of exciting things happening at Estee Lauder. I hope that you find this encouraging for yourself and to see that even a company that's a prestige beauty brand is trying to increase their commitments into sustainability and citizenship. So that's really what I wanted to share with everybody. I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
Yes, if you have questions, send them along to the aisles. We have some folks walking down. I know we have Ray.
And while we're waiting for that, I have a question for you. So can you share a little bit about how consumers are interacting with Estee Lauder over sustainability issues?
Sure. Well, consumers are always asking questions, and they're always wanting to know what's in your product or whether the product could be recycled or not. So what we do is we encourage those type of questions, and what consumers are doing is just kind of reinforcing our directions that we're going in, and it gives us opportunities to address their concerns, which are always changing, ever changing. So it's something that we're trying to stay ahead of.
Okay, great. How about investors?
Yeah. So
how are investors speaking to you about sustainability issues?
Yeah, investors are very active. We have regular calls with groups that purchase our products. They want to know that we are managing these issues well. So the reason for this is that a company that's staying ahead of the curve when it comes to sustainability is a well-managed company. So they are constantly asking questions, and one of the reasons I love sustainability is it's a very dynamic area, and there's always new things to be concerned about, and things that we're talking about today, some people wouldn't even have believed that we had to be concerned about these things in the past. And investors are driving a lot of activity by companies too, just by asking questions. And if you don't really have a good answer, you say, "We'll get back to you on that." And it also is one of the inputs that we use to help to validate the direction we're going and to give us some ideas on future directions.
Okay, I'm just encouraging everyone to write questions. So, but at the same time, I have loads of questions to ask.
Sure.
Estee Lauder operates across a global landscape, which must be quite challenging in terms of both compliance and different cultures and different expectations. How does that impact your development of sustainability goals?
Yeah, so we do operate in many regions of the world, and it is something that we have to consider. So when we look at setting some of the sustainability goals and metrics, which I've discussed today, we have to consider international implications of those type of things and how they will even show up, and even the words that we use to describe our goals too. So you have to be very clear and making sure the words you're using will resonate well across the globe, and not just, even though we're headquartered here in New York City, not just having a U.S. only mindset. So, and also some of the issues are different in parts of the globe, and it does get challenging because some consumers they are, if they're buying a prestige product, they want it to feel weighty, and sometimes that goes against sustainability. So in some cases, you might have to do some education when it comes to that in certain parts of the world, where other parts of the world that might not be an issue. So that's one of the things that we have to do, is to scan what's going on out there in all regions of the world, so that we kind of stay ahead of the curve, and making sure that we're addressing all consumers' needs and desires.
Okay, so I have some questions coming in here. One is, how do you monitor the social and environmental impact of your suppliers?
Yeah, so we have a responsible sourcing group, which has been expanding recently too. We use software to help us to do that. We tap into some of our existing programs, or our quality programs with our suppliers, and we have scorecards that we use to judge how well the suppliers are performing. We have a supplier code of conduct, which we expect them to adhere to, and we do checks against those type of things, through audits or virtually through the use of software platforms. So there's a constant engagement. I was just having a discussion yesterday with our responsible sourcing team. And one of the things, a lot of companies operate this way, where you have like your tier 1 suppliers, the most important suppliers, and you actually operate with them as like partners. So we were talking about, not only should we be having discussions with them regarding the business, but with these sustainability goals that I had just mentioned, is like, how can you guys help us? We're partners here. And so I think that's really the beauty of working with your supply chain partners, is that you can have so much more impact to make, drive environmental issues, lower impacts, throughout the supply chain, and expand your impact into social issues as well.
Okay, a follow-up question to that is how you're working through your distribution chain to encourage sustainable practices, such as department stores, drugstores, and others that may be carrying the product.
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the areas that we are working on to go even further has to do with our distribution chain through our retail outlets. And what we are doing right now, we are doing some sustainable practices, but we really want to make it much more of a robust process. So if you could envision having a set of sustainability best practices based on where we're selling. So in some cases we have our own stores that we sell into. You can go to a Veda store in a mall, for example. In some cases we're in at one of our retail partners, like Sephora or Ultra or Macy's, Nordstrom. So we have like little sort of sections in their store too. So what we want to do is develop sustainability best practices for all those different ways that we show up, and our own manufacturing sites, our own R&D sites as well. And then have a review of all those sustainability practices and try to roll them out. Have some that are mandatory, and if certain stores want to go even further, we're going to give them ideas on how to do that. I know that some initiatives have already occurred, like those displays that you'll see our products displayed in our stores. They're lit up. They're made out of plastic. What happens to them when they get changed out? So we have a program which actually started with our MAC Cosmetics called Back to MAC, which is really like a circular economy. It's been around for quite a while, so it's a pretty forward thinking, where you could return your MAC used packaging, and we'll take it and we'll recycle it for you. So we're even doing that with some of our displays now too, and we're trying to use even post-consumer recycled content and those type of things as well, just as an example of the type of sustainability best practices. And of course, the lighting, using the most energy efficient lighting in our stores is something we want to assure throughout the world.
Great. One of the audience members commented that your efforts to support girls are great, and asks, what are you doing to support women in your supply chain?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we actually just recently signed on to a project which is called the HER Project, which is to help women. It's through BSR. It's to help women in the supply chain. And one of the things that we're looking at when it comes to working with our suppliers is how can we partner with the sourcing end too. Like if we're purchasing, let's say, a commodity, can we partner with that supplier to enable and to ensure that women are earning a living wage, for example. But that project that we signed on to is an example of that type of project, and we are kind of stirring up the pot with our suppliers and asking them for these type of things. This is where it could be a win-win situation with our suppliers. So it's an important area. And I'd say also when it comes to our standards, like our supplier code of conduct, that's another way really to protect women in the workforce. We want to make sure our suppliers are not doing any unethical practices when it comes to women working in one of their factories, for example.
Okay, moving on to talk about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question too, really. Can you talk about how your SDGs are integrated into executive goals and objectives, and who is accountable for progress against your SDGs?
Yeah, so in our next sustainability report, which I mentioned will be coming out in September, we're going to clearly describe on how we are living into the SDGs. So there's a couple of them that we're going to work on specifically, like pretty obvious would be women's issues, right? Since I talked quite a bit about that. That would be one area. The energy, greenhouse gas programs, continuing our efforts in that regards, would be another direction. And as far as whether our management is held accountable, I'll say I feel really privileged coming into a company where our CEO made sustainability a corporate strategic focus area. So in the business itself, it's like not sustainability is on the side and you guys kind of keep us out of trouble type thing. It's like this is part of the business. So every brand, region, and function has to speak to in their annual strategy process what they're doing regarding sustainability. So that's a huge commitment. And it's also something that we're looking at how we can transform our business. So all aspects of our business have to look at how they are going to make sustainability a part of the way they do things, like R&D, for example, and our packaging, our supply chain operations, those type of things. So everybody, it has to be front of mind, and they have to speak about it. And our CEO sits through all the strategy sessions of every brand, every region, every function, and he's asking questions about these type of things.
Okay, got a lot of questions now. When and why did the CEO at Estee Lauder become convinced of the importance of sustainability, and how do you demonstrate the ROI?
Yeah, so I can't speak to, I've only been there 9 months, so I can't speak to when, but I know it was, not just yesterday. But there's some of the things that I already spoke to on one of the slides is the, consumers, the high interest of consumers, the investors, the high interest of investors, the employees. I mean, everybody around the world is interested in sustainability. So you'd have to pretty much be, not paying attention to not see that. So that's why, he also sees this as a very important way for us to improve our business as well. So that's the main thing. When it comes to ROI, we have to have a business case for everything that we do. So those goals that I mentioned, before we were going to speak to those goals, of course there has to be checks, right? And one of the key checks was finance. So finance wanted to know, how much are these goals going to cost? And is there an ROI on these goals? And what does it look like over time? And our CFO had to sign off on the goals. We actually have like a senior finance person assigned to us just to work on everything that we do. So, some of the things we do, it will save money over time, like the energy programs, I believe, over time will save money. But some of the things we do will be a cost. Like when we're changing our packaging, if you have to pay for new molds, for example, there's an expense there, right? And if we're changing materials, something that isn't readily recyclable to something more, there's a cost there. And there isn't necessarily a ROI for those type of things, but it's the type of things that you have to do if you want to become more sustainable. So that's how we're addressing the finance aspect.
Great. I have several questions here asking how Estee Lauder decides how to align with nonprofit organizations, both for employee volunteering and also for cause marketing purposes.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the way we decide is, first off, whoever we partner with, there has to be a nexus to what we're doing, right? So I kind of alluded to that when I was talking about the purpose-driven goal aspect. So some of our brands are going to want to have more environmental leaning social causes. Environmental causes. Others more social causes that they're going to live into. So we'll look for a partner that is actually, doing work in that area. And then, of course, there has to be, checks and balances. We have to make sure what they're doing is what we're expecting. And so, again, finance gets involved, procurement gets involved, and we have a vetting process. And that's pretty much the way that we go about it. But primarily, I would say, there has to be this nexus with the purpose of the brand or a direction that the corporation wants to go in. And that's the starting place, and then we build from there.
Okay, got a couple of questions here that relate to just the size and scope of Estee Lauder. One asks how you coordinate targets and practices with so many different brands. Do they have their own targets and practices? And another question points out that there are loads of ingredients in other countries that are banned ingredients, but relatively few in the US. So how do you coordinate across these kinds of big landscapes, lots of ingredients, lots of brands?
Yeah, so it's difficult, but it's something that we have to do. So when it comes to goals, so we have these enterprise-wide goals, right? So then what we're doing right now is we're coming up with annual objectives for each of the brands. So what brands are going to help us to get there? They all have to live into them, but some brands will be carrying a heavy load in certain goals than others. So we're developing those annual metrics. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have scorecards for each of the brands. And also a scorecard for the enterprise too, which we'll speak to management about. Every brand will be given their objectives. There'll be some discussion back and forth, and then they'll have annual targets. And that's you manage what you measure, so you have to have these type of things in order to drive these type of things. When it comes to ingredients in products, so I'm a big believer in having robust emerging issues process. So, ingredients we're talking about today, was a thought in some researcher's head a decade ago, right? So how do we get this? How do we get these signals early on? So we do have processes in those areas, but we're also, that's an area where we're going to expand our efforts as well. So we have a really great regulatory affairs team who scans the world for regulations to make sure we're compliant with all of the product, the restrictions. We have to look to what our NGOs are saying, what research is out there. We have to look at general trends, what our consumers are speaking about. And sometimes we even have to do things that we don't feel make scientific sense. If consumers are concerned about a specific ingredient, we really feel there's no issue with it, and you can't convince them otherwise, then you have to, change the way that you're doing things. So brands can set their own goals and targets, and they do, and we have processes for them to do that. But of course, their targets have to be even more stringent than what the enterprise-wide targets are.
Okay, and just sort of following up on that about ingredients, what are the best means and methods of being transparent about that with consumers and others?
Yeah, so best practice, as I see, for when it comes to ingredient transparency, besides on-pack ingredients, but is really brand websites. Going to a brand website, that's why we have an objective for putting our key ingredients on every brand website. That you would be able to go there and say, well, I'm not sure what this ingredient is. You'll be able to go to our website and be able to see what the purpose of that ingredient is and why we have it in our formulas. So I think that's kind of like what I see as best practice right now, is that there's a way for you to do some research. And the company, even though they're not required to make all of these, to make those type of statements available, it's something I think it helps to build trust, and that's why we set a goal for ingredient transparency.
Okay, time for maybe just one or two more questions. I have several questions here asking about how your sustainability message is resonating with media, influencers, and consumers in this country and in other countries.
Yeah, so that's another good question too. You know, I have this saying when it comes to making products more sustainable or greener products. I say two things. There's no such thing as a green product because every product can be improved. And then I say, what good is a greener product if nobody knows about it? What good are sustainability practices if nobody knows about it? So it's kind of counterintuitive to like a family company like Estee Lauder to actually have to go out and to tell people what we're doing, because you know there's a humility factor there. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, in this day and age, you have to speak about these things, because if you don't, then people assume you're not doing anything. Your consumers assume you're not doing anything. If they see one of your competitors speaking about all the great things they're doing sustainability-wise, and you're doing the same thing, but you're not telling anybody about it, it's like it never even happened. So I'd say that our sustainability message is starting to get some good pickup. For example, just recently, last week, I believe it was, we announced that we had joined the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is the leading organization when it comes to the circular economy. So, you know, we just didn't join, we did tell people about it, right? God bless you. We told people about it, and that got some pretty good media pickup, you know, and I think these things are just additional proof points when you do things to show that you are trying to move the needle in the right direction, and it just helps the whole believability of a company's story when you're showing what you're doing and you're reporting on what you're doing publicly.
All right, one last question, and then I think we'll need to conclude. I have several questions here about Estee Lauder's role in educating employees and others about sustainability issues. And there are several voices here asking how you are going about that with young professionals and how young professionals can do more to make an impact and encourage change.
Yeah, so that also ties into one of our sustainability goals, which is on learning. So what we're doing is we are making training available on sustainability to all employees, right? So I spoke to that a little bit. When it comes to young professionals, I mean, what we've seen and what I've seen is that there's a great interest. No matter what discipline you're working in, you can make a difference when it comes to sustainability. For example, let's say you go into the procurement area. Even if you're not part of the responsible procurement program, you still can come up with ideas in the area that you're managing on how you can do things differently and how the company could do things differently. Or if you're in a supply chain, you might come up with an idea on how we can reduce waste or water in the manufacturing facility that we might not have thought about it. So everybody's encouraged to bring ideas forward. The other thing that kind of ties into one of the previous questions has to do with communications, right? So the same thing goes, as I mentioned, externally. If people don't hear about what you're doing, it applies to employees too. So that same example, when we joined the CE 100 of Ellen MacArthur, we told our employees about it through our newsletter, to our in-house, digital newsletter, so that they know about that. And employees are asking questions about these things, and they really feel good when they see these type of things. And you'll get, likes just like you would on any social post in your internal social media too. So that's just another way to make employees aware of and being open to hear ideas from employees and seeing if we might be able to change the direction we were going. And I'll give you a great example though of what one employee in our company actually took it upon himself to start that whole program I mentioned about displays and using post-consumer recycled content in displays and making the displays more recyclable. So that was like his idea. He came up with it. He thought sustainability was important, and then he was able to actually implement it and do it. So I think giving employees the freedom to innovate and to live into sustainability and the overarching sustainability objective is the type of things that companies need to do, and the type of things that I want to see us continue to encourage.
That's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Al Iannuzzi from Estee Lauder.